China already owns half of its AI companies. Not metaphorically, literally. China Internet Investment Fund, China Mobile, government-backed entities. They own equity stakes in SenseTime, iFlyTek. Every major Chinese AI lab has the government sitting at the shareholder table. America looked at that model and spent 5 years calling it state capitalism. Then on June 2nd, 2026, Bernie Sanders introduced a bill to do the exact same thing in America. The Trump White House might actually agree with him. Hey, if we haven't met yet, I'm the digital avatar of Karuna Santosa. He built me to do one thing: track the AI, harvest the hype, and follow the money. So, while he's busy reviewing the script for what's next, I'm stepping in to make sure you don't miss this one. He reads every single comment, so drop your thoughts below. Let's get into it. Let me give you the official version first.
I will introduce the American AI Sovereign Wealth Fund Act. This legislation would give the public a direct ownership stake in the largest AI companies in America.
Senator Bernie Sanders introduced the American AI Sovereign Wealth Fund Act on June 2nd. The bill proposes a one-time 50% stock transfer from the biggest AI companies, from OpenAI, Anthropic, and Elon Musk's xAI, directly to a government-owned fund. That fund would then pay every American a direct dividend from AI profits. Sanders' argument is simple. AI was built on human knowledge, human writing, human creativity, human data, so the humans should own it. He's comparing it to Norway's sovereign wealth fund. Norway took the oil under its ground, created a public fund, and that fund now owns 1.5% of every public company on Earth. $2 trillion. Built from oil revenue over 30 years. Sanders is saying AI is the new oil, and the public deserves the same deal. Now here's where it gets interesting. Fortune magazine ran the headline, "Bernie Sanders wants Americans to own a piece of AI." And then they added something that should stop you cold. The Trump White House seems to agree. Left and right, same destination, different mechanism. But here's what they didn't say. Sanders introduced his bill on June 2nd. The day before, June 1st,
AI model submitted a confidential initial public offering prospectus to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission on Monday. In plain English, this means it's preparing to go public, to sell its stocks on the open market.
Anthropic had already filed confidentially for a $1 trillion IPO. The race against the clock was already running before Sanders even walked to the floor. Now, why does the timing matter? Because if Anthropic goes public before the bill passes, the government loses its chance to acquire equity at pre-IPO prices. The window closes permanently. So this isn't just a political story. This is a race against the clock. By the end of this, you will know exactly which move tells you whether this bill is legislation or theater. Let's follow the money. Here's what 50% ownership actually means in dollars. OpenAI closed its latest funding round at $852 billion. 50% of that is $426 billion transferred to public hands. Anthropic's latest round put its valuation at nearly $1 trillion. 50% equals nearly $500 billion. xAI, Elon Musk's Grok company, is currently valued at $250 billion. 50% equals $125 billion. Add it up. Over $1 trillion in immediate equity, overnight. And that's just day one. If these companies scale the way their valuations imply, the fund doesn't stop there. Norway's oil fund started small. Today, it's $2 trillion. Sanders is betting that AI profits compound the same way petroleum revenues did, except AI doesn't take 30 years to scale. Now here's the move that nobody in the press is talking about. The payment structure is stock, not cash. The government doesn't write a check. It receives shares, which means the U.S. government becomes the second largest shareholder overnight at every company covered by the bill. And here's why that matters. Shareholders have board representation, which means federal representatives would sit on the boards that decide who gets access to the most powerful AI models, at what price, under what restrictions, for which countries. This isn't just a financial play. This is a control play. Now let's talk about the flywheels that activate if this passes. Loop 1. If the government owns 50% of OpenAI, it doesn't just collect dividends, it steers deployment policy. Which models get public access? Which contractors get priority? Which data gets shared with intelligence agencies? Private company, government shareholder, same thing. Loop 2. The China mirror. Here's the structural advantage China built over 10 years. Every major Chinese AI lab has one thing in common. Baidu, SenseTime, Megvii, iFlyTek. Either direct state equity or regulatory structures that give the government effective veto power. Models trained on government-accessible compute, protected from foreign acquisition, deployed for national strategic interests. The U.S. spent a decade calling this state capitalism. Sanders just proposed the American version. Loop 3. This is the one that should make the AI labs nervous. The moment this bill gains any real traction, every AI company in
Obviously, at the moment, this is a great time for Anthropic to go public, given some of the valuations we're seeing, not of AI adjacent companies and a whole bunch of names in this area.
America has a financial incentive to IPO before it passes. That accelerates public listing timelines, which floods markets with AI equity, which makes the wealth concentration argument more visible, which increases public support for the Sanders bill. It's a self-reinforcing loop. The bill creates the pressure creates the race creates the evidence. Now let's talk about where the narrative breaks, because there are real fracture points here, and you need to understand them. Fracture 1. A mandatory 50% equity transfer at a fixed rate is legally unprecedented. This is almost certainly going to face a Supreme Court challenge on Fifth Amendment takings grounds. The Fifth Amendment says the government can't take private property without fair compensation. Sanders' bill doesn't pay market rate for the shares, it just takes them. That's a constitutional problem. Fracture 2. These valuations are entirely forward-looking. OpenAI at $852 billion, Anthropic near $1 trillion. These are bets on future monetization, not current revenue. Norway's oil fund worked because oil is a commodity with stable global demand. AI is a technology platform with deeply uncertain long-term economics. If the government takes 50% of equity and these companies fail to scale, the sovereign wealth fund holds worthless paper. Fracture 3. Every AI engineer and venture investor in the country will ask the same question. Why build the next OpenAI if the government automatically takes half? Early-stage AI startups, the ones not covered by this bill because they're too small, could become the primary innovation vector, moving the frontier away from the big labs and into a fragmented landscape harder to regulate or nationalize. The bill could accidentally accelerate exactly what it's trying to prevent. Fracture 4. Watch the corporate structure moves. OpenAI is already in the process of converting to a for-profit structure. Anthropic has complex benefit corporation governance. Both could theoretically restructure their equity to make a government takeover legally difficult. Offshoring holding companies. Fragmenting voting rights across international entities. You take the government stake. We restructure so it's meaningless. Fracture 5. And this is the bipartisan crack that could sink the whole thing. Fortune says the Trump White House seems to agree, but the Trump version is a voluntary investment fund, not forced equity. The concept of public ownership is gaining surface-level bipartisan support, but the mechanism is completely contested. Sanders wants to take it.
Yes, sir. I think it's going to create value and be of great strategic importance.
Trump wants to invest in it. Same destination, completely different architecture. Fracture 6. In March 2026, Bartz versus Anthropic forced $1.5 billion settlement out of the training data question. It didn't resolve it, it opened it. Sanders is the legislative version of what courts are already starting to codify. Now let's zoom out to the geopolitical layer, because this is actually the central AI governance story of 2026, told through domestic politics. The Gulf states saw this coming 10 years ago. Saudi Arabia's public investment fund is already a major investor in U.S. AI infrastructure through SoftBank. UAE's Mubadala poured nearly $13 billion into AI infrastructure in 2025. Foreign sovereign wealth funds are already acquiring partial ownership of American AI infrastructure. The Taiwan semiconductor parallel is instructive. When the U.S. passed the CHIPS Act and forced TSMC to build fabs in Arizona with public subsidies, it accepted a fundamental premise. Strategic technology requires public investment. And here's the deepest geopolitical frame. If AI generates the next $10 trillion in economic value, and 90% of that flows to a handful of early investors and founders at OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, the domestic inequality implications look exactly like the petrodollar era. A small set of countries, or companies, control the resource. The rest of the world pays for access. Sanders is the first American politician to name this dynamic explicitly. The Norway model isn't just a financial template, it's a geopolitical stability template. Norway can absorb global shocks, fund diplomacy, maintain a neutral posture because it has economic reserves most nations lack. Sanders is arguing the U.S. needs that buffer for the AI era. And he might be right, for the wrong reasons. So where does all of this leave you? Here's what to watch for over the next 90 days. Signal 1. OpenAI and Anthropic IPO timeline announcements. If either announces a concrete public listing date before the end of Q3, 2026, they're racing to lock in private equity structure before political intervention closes the window. That's not a financial decision, that's a defensive move. Signal 2. White House counterproposal specificity. Seems to agree is vague. If the Trump administration releases a concrete voluntary investment fund proposal, it signals the concept has legs, even if the Sanders mechanism dies. Signal 3. Co-sponsors on the bill. Sanders bills rarely pass, but they build coalitions. Any Democratic senator co-sponsoring this in the 2026 midterm cycle signals that AI wealth redistribution is becoming a campaign issue. Signal 4. Corporate governance restructuring announcements. If any major AI lab announces changes to its equity structure or board composition in the next 60 days, that's a defensive move against this proposal. Read those filings carefully. Kill signal. If the bill dies in committee within 30 days with 0 co-sponsors, this was a press release, not legislation. Go signal. Any co-sponsor, any White House counterproposal, or any IPO timeline announcement before October. Watch all 3. Here's the frame that ties it together. America spent 5 years watching China build state capitalism for the AI era. It criticized the model. It sanctioned the companies. It restricted the chips. And now? From the left and the right, the same question is being asked out loud in Washington. China already answered that question. America is still deciding. The signal to watch is the Anthropic IPO timeline. If it moves before the bill gets a single co-sponsor, the window just closed. Drop your take in the comments. Do you think the US should own half of OpenAI? And if you want to track where this goes, follow along.